The World Wars established submarines as a formidable naval technology, striking terror for their ability to attack enemy ships without being detected. During the Great War, the German Navy sank between 5 and 6,000 Allied merchant vessels, more than 14,000 gross registered tons of shipping. But the first modern submarine was not a German invention. Thanks to an Irishman, the United States was at the forefront of naval submarine technology. The USS Holland, generally considered to be the first modern submarine to be adopted by any major navy, was the forerunner of the naval technology that is still central to naval warfare today. But its designer, John Philip Holland, would be nearly forgotten.
Humans have been interested in submarine-like devices and machines for much of history, but it wasn't until the end of the 19th century that they became practical. The United States used submarines basically since inception, since David Bushnell built the Turtle, a one-man submersible that was unsuccessfully used to try and set explosives on British ships in 1776. Submarine technology improved throughout the 1800s, but significant issues kept early submarines in the experimental stage. Both the Union and Confederacy fielded submarines in the Civil War, with the CSS Hunley becoming the first sub to successfully sink an enemy ship. The invention of self-propelled torpedoes in the 1860s and technological improvements around balance, propulsion, and quick submergence improved just before the turn of the century. In 1873, John Philip Holland, an Irish engineer, immigrated to the United States. He had had ideas for submarines, but he saw little opportunity in Ireland to explore his inventions. In addition, as an Irishman, he had a certain distaste for working with the English. "I had no mind to do anything that would make John Bull any stronger or more domineering than we already found him," he later said. In the U.S., he worked as a teacher for the Order of Christian Brothers in New Jersey, and in 1875 presented his ideas to the United States Navy. The officers at the Newport, Rhode Island Naval Torpedo Station were dismissive. Opportunity came instead thanks to the cause of Irish independence. John Devoy and Jeremiah O'Donovan Rossa had been exiled by the British, and in the United States they joined the Fenian movement. Holland's brother Michael introduced them, and they were interested in the potential of Holland's invention as a method of asymmetrical warfare against the technologically superior British. With their financial support, Holland launched his first submarine in 1878. He soon proved that it could run on the surface, submerge, and resurface. Holland then began work on balance, a low center of gravity, and reserves of positive buoyancy. He moved the hydroplanes, like the horizontal stabilizers on the back of an airplane, to the rear of the craft, which allowed the sub to submerge more quickly. The first sub, Holland Boat No. 1, was scuttled in the Passaic River. Construction for the follow-up ship was contracted to Delameter Ironworks in New York, but Holland left the builders in the dark as to the ship's purpose and funding. It began to attract considerable interest, first from emissaries from all over Europe, and then from England, where they learned that the Fenians were funding the craft's construction. A private detective hired by the British even obtained a copy of Holland's plans. The British, however, were unconcerned. In June 1880, the director of naval construction declared that there was no reason to anticipate this boat can ever be a real danger to British ships. The Fenian ram, officially known as Holland Boat No. 2, had a design influenced by the first successful self-propelled torpedo, called the Whitehead torpedo, as well as from porpoises. The initial tests went well. At one point it rammed the pier accidentally, splitting a 12-inch pile but taking no damage itself. It performed admirably. Holland said that there is scarcely anything required of a good submarine boat, that this one did not do well enough. He also designed a smaller version, dubbed Holland 3, a prototype. Unfortunately, disagreements over payment led the Fenians to steal both the ram and the Holland 3, once they sailed to Connecticut. But without anyone who knew how to operate either of them, the Holland 3 was lost at sea, and the ram was sold for scrap, eventually placed in a museum in Paterson, New Jersey, where it's on display today. Holland would never work for the Fenians again. He founded the Nautilus Submarine Boat Company in 1885, through which he constructed the Holland 4. The Holland 4 was partially funded by soldier and military engineer Lieutenant Edmund Zielinski as a platform for his own invention, the pneumatic dynamite gun. The design was plagued by a shoestring budget, although it did successfully complete some trial runs. The boat was eventually sold for scrap, and Zielinski's gun, while the design some use in the war with Spain, proved mechanically unreliable. The French, meanwhile, were constructing their own designs under Claude Goubet, making use of advances in electric batteries. The 1889 Goubet II was a significant advancement, although not perfect as it struggled to run at a constant depth. The French Navy launched the Gymnot in 1888. The craft was 56 feet long and displaced 30 tons. It was equipped with torpedoes. The Spanish launched the electric-powered Peral just a few weeks earlier. Holland thought the designs were based on certain fundamental points of my Fenian ram design, but was frustrated that the Americans, despite mild interest in French submarines, remained uninterested in pursuing submarine technology. The U.S. Navy, however, was coming around to the idea. They announced a competition to develop a submarine torpedo boat that could move at 8 knots underwater, remain submerged for 2 hours, and fire torpedoes. Holland won the competition, but it took years to procure the actual contract. The boat was authorized by Congress on March 3, 1893, and in 1894 Holland became the manager of the Holland Torpedo Boat Company. The submarine, dubbed Plunger, began construction in 1895. The 149-ton, 84-foot-long boat was to be powered by a steam engine in combination with an electric engine. She was launched in August 1897. Holland determined that steam power would not work in a submarine and was frustrated by bureaucratic oversight of his work. Especially galling was the Navy's demand for a deck and surface guns. The Navy does not like submarines, he said, because there's no deck to strut on. As Holland predicted, the steam engine on Plunger proved problematic, and the boat was never accepted into service. But even while constructing Plunger, Holland had turned instead to a new design, the Holland 6, not as an official military project, but a private one. Constructed at the Crescent Shipyard in Elizabethport, New Jersey, at one point a careless worker left open a valve, which filled the sub, sinking it to the bottom of the yard and delaying the ship's launch. They were able to fix the damaged electrical system with the assistance of Frank T. Cable. When asked if he would go down to the submarine, Cable replied, "Not for anything would I attempt to do so." Holland 6 was launched in May 1897. The New York Times reported on May 17th that the little cigar-shaped vessel was launched and that it may or may not play an important role in the navies of the world in the years to come. The Holland 6 had some innovative design features. It had a conning tower and was capable of making precise adjustments to her depth. She was armed with a single torpedo tube designed for Whitehead Mark II torpedoes and had a pneumatic dynamite gun in the bow and initially a second dynamite gun in the stern. Like Plunger, she had a dual-engine system with a 4-stroke Otto gasoline engine for surface sailing and an electrodynamic electric motor for when it was submerged. Holland was smaller than Plunger, 54 feet long, with a displacement of 65 tons on the surface. Holland 6 solved many issues. It was a porpoising submarine, meaning that she always had a positive buoyancy and required the engine to force the vessel to dive. He had also solved the balance issue with water-filled tanks that maintained a low center of gravity. It made its first successful submergence on St. Patrick's Day, 1898. A few weeks later, the submarine was tested before the Navy, and notwithstanding his earlier comment, Cable had joined as the ship's electrician. The test was a resounding success. "I report my belief that the Holland is a successful and veritable submarine torpedo boat," the Observer reported. "She is an engine of warfare of terrible potency, which the government must necessarily adopt in its service." The Holland 6 impressed the Navy. In November 1899, Rear Admiral Mordecai T. Endicott, chief of the Bureau of Yards and Docks, was quoted in the New York Journal. "The Holland submarine torpedo boat will revolutionize the world's naval warfare. If this wonderful and invaluable invention be all that it is claimed for it, and I have no reason to doubt the claims, the first thought is that it will make the American Navy the most formidable antagonist of the greater navies of the world." In 1898, Lieutenant Commander W. W. Kimball confidently told a Senate committee that if they gave him 6 Holland submarine boats, the officers and crew to be selected by me, and I will pledge my life to stand off the entire British squadron 10 miles off Sandy Hook without any aid from our fleet. Holland and his company waited for Washington to make his final decision. On April 10th, the Assistant Secretary of the Navy sent a letter to Navy Secretary John D. Long. "I think that the Holland should be purchased," it began. "I don't think in the present emergency, that being the recent tensions with Spain and the sinking of the Maine at Cuba, we can afford to let her slip. I recommend that you authorize me to enter into negotiations for her. Very sincerely yours, T. Roosevelt." The government quibbled about the ship's merits, but elsewhere there was interest. A report came in that the French government was offering $100,000 for the ship. After submerging the sub for nearly an hour, Holland asked, "What will the Navy require next? That my boat should climb a tree?" Spain declared war on the United States on April 23rd, and the newspapers clamored that Holland promised to be an important weapon in the coming war. Holland himself even offered to sail the sub to Santiago and sink the Spanish fleet if it still be in Santiago harbor. There were also reports that the sub was already purchased and at work. A fantastic article in the Wheeling Daily Intelligencer claimed that the sub was already at Havana and that she could clear the harbor of mines in less than 30 minutes. But the war was over by August, too quickly for Holland to test her capability for warfare. It took another 2 years of tests and demonstrations for the government to agree to buy Holland. She sailed to the Washington Naval Yard in 1899 to lobby for her own purchase. Admiral George Dewey watched a demonstration and declared that if Spain had had 2 of them, I could never have held Manila. With 2 of these in Galveston, all the navies of the world could not blockade that place. The government finally agreed to buy Holland on April 11, 1900, for $150,000. In July, the Naval Appropriation Act authorized the construction of 5 more Holland submarines of an improved design, later increased to 6. But things had not been going well for Holland's business. He was behind on back taxes for his foreign patents, which de facto ended up under the control of the company. Holland's company had been subsumed under the Electric Boat Company. In June of 1900, just as the success of his ship seemed assured, Holland was demoted from manager to chief engineer. Now in the Navy, the Holland became United States submarine torpedo boat Holland, Submarine 1. The new ships that were ordered began construction at Elizabethport, starting with the prototype Fulton, named after Robert Fulton, an early American submarine inventor. It was to be the first of the Plunger or Adder class, but Holland had essentially been sidelined in its development. Fulton was launched on June 12, 1901, followed in the same year by the first of the class Adder, and then Moccasin, Porpoise, and Shark. 3 more were completed over the next 2 years: Plunger, Grampus, and Pike. Fulton shocked the world in November when she stayed submerged for 15 hours. The British built their first submarine, the A-1, based on designs of the improved Holland. Holland had built them 5 earlier subs, including HMS Holland, launched in 1901. With less to do, Holland began designing a new submarine, and with promises of funding, Holland resigned from the company on March 28, 1904. He'd made no fortune from his work that would bring so much money to the Electric Boat Company. He set off to construct his new design, a high-speed submarine boat designed for coast defense and for work on the high seas. He consulted on 2 of Japan's first submarines, which were again based on Holland's designs. These designs were faster and larger than the ships similar to the Plunger class that had been built by Holland's former company and purchased by the Japanese. Versions of Holland's designs also heavily influenced the first submarines in Russia and the Netherlands navies. Holland's attempts at a new company, however, were scuttled. Shortly after forming a new company, the Electric Boat Company sued, claiming that he had promised to give them all of his inventions and patents during his natural term of his life. Though the suits were dismissed, they effectively destroyed Holland's company and chances of building his last submarine. He continued to come up with ideas, including a passenger submarine for tourist purposes and a flying machine, which he patented in 1913. Holland died on August 12, 1914, shortly after the outbreak of the war that would leave no one any doubt of the military importance of submarines. 6 of the 7 Plunger-class subs would serve in the Philippines during World War I. Though they were important for submarine technology, rapid advancements quickly made them obsolete. Plunger was decommissioned in 1913, and 4 of the others decommissioned in 1919. Grampus and Pike were the last to be decommissioned in 1921. All except Plunger were used as targets. The prototype Fulton was sold to the Russians.
The Electric Boat Company, today General Dynamics Electric Boat, continues to build submarines for the United States Navy. Holland never received significant financial gain for his work, and by the time of his death, submarine pioneer Frank Cable said that he was unknown to his neighbors as a man of any note. He has received some recognition. In addition to the original USS Holland, several submarine tenders have been named in his honor by the United States Navy. In 2014, a monument was dedicated to him in Ireland, and in 2016, a center was opened there displaying his work. Holland's persistence in designing and selling his submarine to the United States Navy made the United States a center of early submarine technology and had a significant impact on early submarine construction. But more than 100 years later, his name is nearly forgotten. I hope you enjoyed watching this episode of The History Guy, and if you did, please feel free to like and subscribe and share The History Guy with your friends. And if you also believe that history deserves to be remembered, then you can support The History Guy as a member on YouTube, a supporter on our community at Locals, or as a patron on Patreon. You can also check out our great merchandise shop or book a special message from the History Guy on Cameo.